My name is Emily. I was 24 when I decided to leave my small town in Texas and move to New York City. I always dreamed of living in a big city, but I never imagined how hard it would be when you do not speak English well. I still remember the day. I arrived at JFK Airport with 2 heavy suitcases and a heart full of hope. I looked around and everything felt so fast, so loud, so big. I felt lost and scared. I could not even ask for directions properly because my English was so broken. The first few days were the hardest. I stayed with my cousin Sarah, who had been living in New York for 5 years. She helped me with small things like ordering food or buying a subway ticket, but I knew I could not depend on her forever. I had to learn English fast if I wanted to survive in this city. I would wake up every morning and go for a walk in Central Park just to listen to people talking around me. I would sit on a bench and write down words I heard, but did not understand. Then at night, I would watch American movies with subtitles. I did not understand everything, but I kept watching. I kept listening, I kept trying. One morning, I gathered all my courage and went to a coffee shop alone. I stood in line, my heart pounding in my chest. When it was my turn, I tried to order a coffee, but my words came out wrong. The barista smiled and helped me anyway. I walked out of that shop feeling proud of myself. It was just one coffee, but for me, it was the first step. I started carrying a small notebook everywhere. I wrote every new word, every new sentence. I heard I would talk to strangers even if I made mistakes. I would laugh at myself when I failed, but I never stopped trying. I also joined a local English conversation group where people from different countries met twice a week to practice speaking. The first time I went, I was so nervous I could barely say my name. But the people there were kind. They encouraged me. They corrected me without making me feel bad. Days turned into weeks. I started understanding more. I started speaking more. I could finally ask for directions without fear. I could order food with confidence. I even made a few American friends who helped me with slang and expressions. I still remember one night I was walking down Times Square, the lights shining, the streets full of people. I realized I was no longer scared. I felt like I belonged. This city that once felt so strange was now starting to feel like home. My biggest motivation was my dream. I wanted to work in fashion. I wanted to be part of New York's creative world, but I knew without English my dream would stay just a dream. So every day I pushed myself. I read newspapers, I listened to the radio. I repeated words again and again. Every morning I would wake up with new energy. I knew that if I wanted to truly live in New York, I had to keep practicing. I started talking to my neighbors in the building, even if I felt shy at first. I would greet the doorman every day with a smile. And simple words like good morning or how are you? Slowly I added more sentences. I told him about the weather or asked about his day. I felt proud when he understood me and smiled back. At the grocery store, I started asking for help finding things. I would say, "Excuse me, can you help me find the milk?" It was not perfect, but people were kind and they helped me. I was learning without even realizing it. One day I got lost in the subway. I felt panic rise in my chest, but I took a deep breath and asked a stranger for help. The young man smiled and gave me directions. I thanked him, and for the first time, I felt like I could handle life here. Step by step, I was becoming stronger. I knew the journey was long, but I was on the right path. My English was no longer just words, it was becoming my voice. One morning, I decided to visit the public library near my apartment. I had heard that libraries in New York were beautiful and full of life. I walked in and felt like I had entered a new world. The smell of books, the quiet atmosphere, the people reading in every corner. I felt peaceful. I picked up an English book for beginners and sat near the window. Sunlight touched my face as I opened the first page. The words were hard, the sentences felt heavy, but I kept reading. I whispered the words softly to myself. I did not care if anyone looked at me. I was there to learn. Every time I came across a new word, I would write it down in my notebook. I would look it up later and practice saying it. I read out loud. I listened to how the words sounded. Imagined myself speaking them with confidence in real life. In that library, I spent hours. Sometimes I forgot the time. Sometimes I smiled when I understood a sentence fully. It felt like magic. My heart felt light. I was proud of every small victory. I was proud of myself for not giving up. One day an old lady sitting near me smiled and said, "You are doing great, keep it up." I smiled back and said thank you. That was the first time I spoke to a stranger. Without fear, I felt something change inside me. I started visiting the library every week. It became my favorite place. I loved the way stories came alive in books. I loved how reading made my English better without pressure. I felt happy. I felt free. Slowly I realized that English was not just a language. It was the key to a new life. A life where I could dream bigger. A life where I could connect with people from all over the world. A life where I could finally be me. After a few months in New York, I started feeling something new inside me. It was not just about learning English anymore. It was about becoming someone I had always wanted to be. A person who does not give up. A person who keeps moving forward no matter how hard the journey gets. I still remember one afternoon. I was sitting alone in Bryant Park. The weather was cold, but the sun was shining. I had my notebook in my hand and I was writing down words I had learned that week. As I looked around, I saw people laughing, talking, reading. I thought to myself, one day, I will be able to speak like them without fear, without hesitation. That day I made a decision. I promised myself I would speak English every single day, no matter what, even if I made mistakes. Even if people laughed, even if I felt embarrassed. I would not stop. I joined an online language exchange app where I could talk to native speakers through voice calls and messages. At first I was terrified. My heart would beat so fast before every call. But the more I did it, the better I became. I met people from all over America who were kind, patient, and supportive. They helped me correct my sentences. They taught me slang words I had never heard before. I also started keeping a diary in English every night before sleeping. I would write a few lines about my day in simple words. Sometimes it was just, I went to the store today and bought bread. Sometimes it was, I feel happy today because I spoke English without fear. The more I wrote, the more confident I felt. One weekend, I decided to attend a free English workshop in a community center. I walked into the room full of strangers and sat down quietly. The teacher was cheerful and made everyone feel comfortable. We practiced speaking in pairs. I remember laughing for the first time in English. I felt alive. I felt like I was finally part of the world around me. That evening, I called my parents back home and spoke to them in English for the first time. I wanted to show them how far I had come. My mom was so happy she cried. I could hear the pride in her voice. My dad said, "Keep going, we are proud of you." I felt tears in my eyes too, but they were tears of joy. The more I practiced, the more my confidence grew. I started watching American TV shows without subtitles. I listened to podcasts every morning on my way to the grocery store. I even joined a local gym just so I could talk to people in English. I made small talk with the receptionist. I asked people how to use the machines. I smiled more. I spoke more. One day I was sitting in a coffee shop when a tourist asked me for directions. I smiled and gave clear directions without thinking twice. The tourist thanked me and walked away, but I sat there smiling to myself. I had done it. I had become the person I wanted to be. New York no longer felt like a scary place. It felt like home. The sounds, the people, the energy, all of it became part of my story. And English, which once felt impossible, was now my bridge to this new life. I will never forget the day I faced my biggest fear. It was a cold, windy morning in New York, and I had an important interview for a part-time job at a small coffee shop near Times Square. I had dreamed of working in an American place where I could talk to real people every day, but deep inside I was scared. My heart was heavy. My hands were cold. My mind kept saying, "What if you fail? What if you cannot speak English?" I stood in front of the mirror practicing my sentences again and again. I smiled. I whispered the words I wanted to say, but fear kept crawling back in my mind. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and told myself, "You have come too far to stop now. You can do this." When I reached the cafe, the manager smiled and asked me simple questions. I answered slowly, but I did not stop. I told him about my journey, about how I moved to New York alone, how I learned English, how I never gave up. Even though my words were not perfect, I spoke with my heart. To my surprise, he smiled and said, "We like your spirit. You are hired." My eyes filled with tears, but I held them back. I thanked him and walked out of the cafe with a heart full of pride. I had done it. I had broken another wall. I felt alive. That job changed everything for me. I met new people every day. I took orders. I smiled. I asked customers about their day. Sometimes I made mistakes. Sometimes people laughed, but I laughed too. I learned that language is not just about words. It is about connection. It is about showing who you are. One evening, a little girl came with her mother, and she looked at me and said, "You talk funny." I smiled and said, "That is because I am still learning English." The mother smiled and said, "But you are doing amazing. Keep going." That small moment filled me with warmth. I realized people can be kind. You show them your true self. Outside work, I kept pushing myself. I joined a local book club even though I was the only non-native speaker. I listened, I read. I spoke, I laughed. I made friends who cheered me on, who corrected me gently, who helped me grow. I also started recording myself speaking every night. I would tell the camera about my day. I would talk about my dreams, my fears, my progress. When I listened back, I could hear the change. I could hear my voice becoming stronger, my words flowing better. I felt unstoppable. One night I sat alone on a rooftop watching the lights of the city. I thought about the girl I used to be. The girl who arrived in New York scared, lonely, lost. The girl who could not order a coffee without shaking hands. That girl was still inside me, but she had transformed. She had become someone brave, someone determined, someone who believed in herself. I whispered to the sky, "Thank you. Thank you for not letting me give up. Thank you for every tear, every failure, every small victory." I smiled with tears. New York had not just taught me English, it had taught me life. It had taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move forward even when fear is standing right in front of Life in New York kept moving fast, and so did my journey every morning. I woke up with one goal in my heart: to keep going, to keep learning, to keep becoming the person I had always dreamed of. I no longer saw myself as a stranger. I saw myself as part of the rhythm of the city. I remember one special morning when I stood in front of the mirror, and for the first time, I did not see fear in my eyes. I saw confidence. I saw someone who had fought hard to be here. I smiled to myself and whispered softly, "You are not the same person anymore. You are growing, you are winning." I started doing new things that I had always been too afraid to try. I signed up for a public speaking class at the community college. I was terrified, but I knew I had to break this wall too. The first day, I walked into the room, my hands were shaking, my heart was racing, but I kept reminding myself, "You have come this far, you can do this." When it was my turn to speak, I stood in front of strangers and told them my story: how I moved to New York with broken English, how I faced failure, how I kept standing back up. Even though my voice trembled, I kept going. I saw people nodding, smiling, encouraging me. I felt a spark inside me, something I had never felt before. I felt powerful. After the class, one of the students came up to me and said, "Your story inspired me. You are so brave." I smiled, and for the first time I truly believed it. I believed that I was brave, that I was capable, that I was enough. The job at the coffee shop became more than just work. It became my playground for practice every day. I challenged myself to speak longer sentences, to ask customers about their day, to tell little jokes. I still made mistakes, but I learned to laugh at them. I learned to grow from them. One rainy afternoon, an old man came into the cafe soaked and shivering. I offered him a warm coffee and we started talking. He told me he had lived in New York his whole life. He listened to my story and smiled kindly and said, "You remind me of myself when I was young. You have heart, never lose that." Those words stayed with me forever. Outside of work, I kept my promise to myself. I read books, I listen to podcasts. I watch movies without subtitles. I even started writing short stories in English. Small stories about my life, my dreams, my journey. The more I wrote, the more I found my voice. I also started going to language meets in the city, where people from around the world came together to practice English. The first time I spoke in front of that group, I felt my hands sweat, but the more I spoke, the freer I felt. I started making new friends from different cultures. And I realized that we were all on the same journey. We were all learning, we were all growing. One evening I walked through Central Park as the sun set, the sky painted in soft pink and gold. I felt the breeze on my face and I thought about how far I had come. I thought about every fear I had faced, every tear I had cried, every step I had taken. And in that moment I smiled with tears. The seasons changed, and so did I. Time moved on, but the memory of who I was when I first arrived in New York stayed with me like a quiet shadow. I carried it not as a burden but as a reminder of how far I had come, how much I had grown, how deeply I had transformed. One bright morning, I stood in front of the mirror just like I used to, but this time something felt different. I looked into my own eyes and I saw strength. I saw someone who had faced every fear and still kept going. I whispered softly, "You made it. You are living the dream you once thought was impossible." My English had become natural, not perfect, but free. I no longer hesitated when I spoke. I no longer feared making mistakes. I laughed more, I spoke more, I connected with people in ways I never thought possible. I felt alive in every word, in every sentence. I got promoted at a coffee shop. I started training new employees. I shared my story with them. I told them how I had once been terrified to even order coffee in English. They smiled, they laughed, they listened, and in their eyes, I saw the reflection of the journey I had taken. I felt proud not just of the language I had learned, but of the person I had become. One evening, my cousin Sarah invited me to a small gathering. Her friends were there, all native speakers, all talking, laughing, sharing stories. And for the first time, I joined in fully. I told my own stories, I made jokes, I shared my dreams. And when I looked around, I realized no one was looking at me as an outsider. They were seeing me as one of them, as someone who belonged. That night I walked back home under the city lights, my heart full, my soul light. I thought about the first time I had walked these streets, lost and broken, and I smiled with quiet joy. I had built a life, I had built a voice, I had built a new self. I called my parents and spoke to them in English without fear, without struggle. My mother laughed and said, "Your voice sounds so happy, my dear." My father said, "We knew you could do it. We always believed in you." Their words wrapped around me like warmth on a cold night, and I felt tears of joy fill my eyes. The girl who once stood silent in a strange city had become a woman who could speak her. I learned that life is not about waiting for the fear to disappear. It is about standing tall even when your knees shake. It is about speaking even when your voice trembles. It is about taking the first step even when you cannot see the full path. And as I stood there under the stars, I knew this was not the end. This was the beginning of every new chapter. I would write every new dream. I would chase every new word. I would speak with heart, with courage, with hope. I closed my eyes, smiled softly, and whispered to the night, "Thank you. Thank you for the journey. Thank you for the transformation. Thank you for teaching me that the only limits we have are the ones we refuse to break." And with that, I took a deep breath and stepped forward into the beautiful unknown with my heart open and my voice strong, forever free.